Let's see what happens. I'm going to refresh that screen. Let's see. We are live. That was a push of a button session. Good evening, everyone. I need to stop looking at the wrong camera. Here we are. We are focused. We are professional. So good evening, everyone. My name indeed is Simon Misiewicz from Optimised Accountants. And tonight's session, we are, let's check the date. It is the Monday, the 7th of June, 2021, the Property Expert Panel. And we have many property expert panel members to answer your question in regards to property. It is sunny, and I wonder if you're outside with a beer, just like Bronwen is, or if indeed you're sitting in the chair waiting for us to start the session. And I think it is better for me to allow everyone else to make the introduction. So Bronwen, would you start us off by introducing who you are and what you do?
Of course. Hello, everybody. My name is Bronwen Vearncombe. I'm a property investor down in Hampshire. Not only have I invested for 7 years, but I'm also helping other people learn. So I have a portfolio of HMOs, that's houses of multiple occupation for those acronym lovers. I've also got holiday lets and some guest houses, and I do some properties for street homeless and some development as well. So a little bit of everything over the years. And now I absolutely love to help other people learn. And partly this group itself was created because we all felt, these are all my experts, we all felt that as investors ourselves, we could give a lot of value by holding just 1 or 2 monthly events. And here we are, I think 16 events we've held so far. So it's wonderful to be with everybody here. And I look forward to answering all your questions. And we've got loads of those already sent to us in advance. So we will definitely be answering those. And those of you that are with us live, put your questions into the chat box. I'm doing Simon's job for him now. He's hosting. But let's move on. I'll move on to Simon Hodgson.
Right, good evening, everybody. Yeah, my name is Simon Hodgson. I've been investing in property for 20 years. I've learned how to build up a portfolio, how to lose it through the credit crunch, rebuild up another portfolio via investing after the credit crunch. And I started out, so those 20 years ago, getting a bit of what was very sporadic and poor education. And what I quickly learned was that very few brokers out there understood what a property investor really needed in terms of a mortgage, let alone which lenders to go to and which products to pick. So I ended up actually showing the then broker that I was using which products to use, etc. Yeah, so I'm here to help answer all your property finance related type questions in terms of investing, and we're going to go through a really creative little deal later on and show how it sort of ties in with the experts on the panel tonight. Let's go to Teresa, I think.
Great, thanks, Simon. This is almost seamless so far. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Teresa. I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association. I am a landlord. I've got HMO tenants who are on benefits and sort of mental health issues and what have you. So I kind of, have quite a bit of knowledge on that. I do offer support to local councils in my region. So I'm in the Midlands region, and yeah, just basically offer updates on current legislation for landlords. And I'm here this evening to, answer any questions that you might have with regard to, being a landlord. So that is me, and I will pass on to Paul.Hilliard.
Evening, one and all, and a lovely June summer's day. Hope it's been nice where you are. My name's Paul.Hilliard. Like many people on this panel, I'm a serial property investor. Careful. Some misery, Sharon. I started off with typical vanilla buy-to-lets, and by vanilla, I'm not on about Aston vanilla. I'm on about plain buy-to-let, so flats, houses, terrace semis. And once I built up a sensible enough portfolio, I decided to sack my boss, which everyone talks about when you go on a course. I decided I would do it once I got to a level where I could, support myself. And from that, I then realised I couldn't support myself because vanilla buy-to-lets don't generally, unless you've got hundreds and thousands, you don't generally get a lot of income. So I quickly went straight forward into HMOs, which Bronwen says houses are, but I like to say houses in multiple occupation. Either version is correct, I like to think. And since then, I've also developed into commercial to residential conversions on a small scale, and I've done service accommodation units, and I'm currently, every single let that comes up, I'm converting that into service accommodation, as it's proving very, very beneficial. So in my part-time role, I'm also the operations director for LNPG. So if you don't know who LNPG are, please go onto the website, which is www.lnpg.co.uk, which stands for Landlords National Purchasing Group. And this was, I've just celebrated my, I think it's my 8th or 9th anniversary there. So if you're on LinkedIn, don't forget to send me a happy face or whatever. So 9 years there, God, that's traveled so fast. But when I started off, I was the 75th member, and we've now got well over 5,000 members. So we must be doing something right. So basically, LNPG is a buying group for landlords. So everything you need for refurb, we don't go for trade discount. We go for a rebate from the manufacturer, because we literally are buying thousands of units from the system. So, if you need a Worcester boiler or a Baxi boiler, we guarantee you can't buy cheaper. If it's one of the boilers, certainly on Worcester, it's unlikely to be beaten, but on Baxi, there are the residential ranges that we don't go for. We go for the professional range, and magnet kitchens are our other main lead. We guarantee that if you're buying from Howdens, you'll usually pay about half the price. So come and talk to us. I hope that's enjoyed you and not turned you all to sleep. And I will now pass on to Mr. Tim.Bishop.
Thank you, Paul. And can I say to everyone, I didn't want to be here tonight. I didn't want to be here at all. I shouldn't have been here. I should have been in Rome, because as of tomorrow, it's my 30th wedding anniversary. So it would have been rather nice in Rome. But sadly, that hasn't happened. So as a result, I'm with you. So apologies, guys, but I'd rather be in Rome with my wife. But never mind. Apart from that, you're not second best. I love to see you all. Right.
Where would your wife rather be, though?
Durham, probably, or Iceland, anywhere else. I'm going to Rome. I don't care. It's a lovely place.
Where is she, I wonder?
She's in the garden, actually. She hasn't run away. Not last time I saw her. I don't think she ran to join the circus with a little knapsack over her shoulder yet, but you never know.
She's not in Rome, but she's with a gnome.
Not one of your better ones, actually, but never mind. Yeah, I'm not that small, thankfully. Right. Who am I? I'm Tim.Bishop. As you can see from Bronwen, we're solicitors. I've got about 65 staff. We have a number of specialist teams. We cover all areas you'd expect, but we particularly specialise in acting for property investors. We have a specialist team covering everything from conveyancing to landlord and tenant and litigation. We also have a highly specialist leasehold team, possibly the largest, the most specialist type of its type in the country, dealing with lease extensions, freehold purchase, right to manage, and those sort of things. So if you've got any query about that, do let us know, because we are genuinely the experts on that. And on that subject, if any of you do have any problems as an investor, we always offer free initial phone advice to our investors, so feel free to get in touch. In addition to that, I have a property portfolio. I'm a bit like Paul.Hilliard. I'm not keen on vanilla buy-to-let. I like added value as well. So I've got an HMO, I've got experience in commercial conversions and serviced accommodation. And as I may have mentioned to those of you who tuned in last month, I've now smashed open the piggy bank. Having been sitting here confidently predicting that the world would end and everything would crash in April, the piggy bank has been opened. So I'm buying an office to put into a SAS. I'm currently in the process of setting up a SAS, being a small self-administered scheme, a pension. And I know one of the questions about pensions tonight, so that's very relevant. So I'm doing that. And I'm also buying another property to go into serviced accommodation with my existing manager. So yes, at long last, I've come out from under my shell. The property tortoise has re-entered the race. And so that's broadly me, Bronwen Bishop, and a property investor myself. Anybody we haven't dealt with so far? Simon, have we dealt with you?
No, Wayne.
Wayne. Oh, sorry, Wayne. Sorry, Wayne. Over to you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, fabulous. Sorry, everybody. Technical issues at this end, or am I just a Luddite? So my name's Wayne Norcliffe. I'm a fellow of the RICS and the Association of Building Engineers. I'm a chartered surveyor working for Castle Surveyors Limited in the south coast of England, focusing mostly on residential surveys and valuation work at the moment and building surveys. We can do commercial surveys. I'll keep it short because my camera might fail at any time. So over to Simon.
Thank you ever so much, everyone, and good evening again. Now, this is the live session, as we discussed in previous. What I would like to talk to you about is making sure that you get your questions asked. I make sure that I will go through all of your questions and then distribute those to the panel members. So please make sure that you get your questions on there, even if we're on tonight on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. Well, actually, no, we failed on LinkedIn again, but we are on YouTube, as you could probably appreciate. So make sure you get your questions through there, and I'll make sure to distribute them. You will see me from time to time looking down and looking to my right, and that is simply because I'm looking at questions and trying to navigate my way through. Now, without further ado, what I want to do is make sure that I start the presentation pack for this evening. So this is really for us to provide you all with an update. So what I'm going to do is go through those slides. And as you can see there, here we are. So I'm going to go through the first few slides, and then we can all give you the updates. The only update there's two updates from me, and I'll be rather quick on this, is the director loan ISA account. Now, if you have a limited company, and typically if you're buying property, you will need to fund that in two different streams. You'll need it through a buy-to-let mortgage and then a pot of cash, which will be your own money. And that's called a director loan. Interesting enough, what we've been investigating with a couple of FCA regulated platforms is for you to have an ISA account. And it's hot off the press. It's literally done today, whereby you can have your ISA account, loan money to your limited company. And don't forget, you can have £20,000 of money into your ISA per year. And if you're a husband, wife, civil partner, that's £40,000. That could be loaned to your limited company. But the interesting thing about that money is that it could be used inside of a limited company to buy properties, but then you are charging your limited company an interest element. The interest is a tax deduction for the company, which means it gets tax relief. The money going to your ISA is tax-free. So it's a real big bonus, really, to have an ISA account and charge yourself an interest rate. Like I say, it's new, hot off the press. It's something that we've been investigating for some time, but I've just notified my team, funny enough, at the same time as I'm telling you guys listening out. So it is very, very new news for everyone concerned. So if you've got any questions about that, feel free to fire those off for me tonight, and I'll try and answer those best I can. The other two is stamp duty land tax. Now, if you're looking to buy a property, you're trying to get the stamp duty land tax holiday for £500,000. Well, you've only got to the end of this month. It is very, very unlikely to get your conveyancing solicitors to get through a deal. I would say to the 30th of June, as many solicitors are under pressure already to get the existing transactions through. So then you're after the SDLT holiday period from the £250,000. Tim, why don't you come on there, because you're the expert in this field rather than myself. But what's your feel in terms of people rushing through the transactions for this stamp duty land tax holiday period?
Well, I was going to open with an appeal on behalf of the RSPCCS, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty in Conveyancing Solicitors. At the moment, the poor conveyancing solicitors are going through hell. They really are. I'm not a conveyancing solicitor myself. I've got a property team of 17, but them and at other firms I know are really struggling because everyone wants to get it done. So first of all, bear with your solicitor. For once, actually, they're under an enormous pressure. A lot of third parties are still going slowly. Now, if you've got a deal you want to get through by the end of the month, in reality, unless you've got cash, no searches and no borrowings, I say your chances are effectively a zero. Even with those, it's going to be difficult because, as I said, there is so much pressure on conveyancing solicitors. Many firms many firms are turning work away because everything is being compounded. And I think it's fair to say that in some ways lockdown's making it worse, because not only are people frantic to get it in to save a bit of cash before the end of the month, but also with many people being either on furlough still or working from home, they seem to have more time to ring up. So the average solicitor is probably getting double the amount of work. So do be kind to your solicitor. If they can do it, I'm sure they will. But bear in mind, it is going to be tough. And there may be some people who simply can't get the job done by the end of the month.
Thank you ever so much for that update, Tim. That's all from me, in all honesty. So I'm happy now to move over to Wayne. So Wayne, if you want to come on air and just talk through this particular slide that I have in front of us. Wayne, are you there? You're on mute. So I'm going to unmute you, Wayne, if that's okay. Okay, I can't even unmute Wayne. So what we'll do, we'll come back. Oh, Wayne, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. You know, I'm having technical issues, I'm afraid, at my end. It's quite embarrassing.
Would you want me to come back to you?
Right.
Let me come back to you.
Would you mind?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, come back to you.
Teresa, why don't we come on to you, good self here?
Yeah, that's great. I'll move on with my little update. I just want to start with just something about universal credit claimants, insofar as the quantity of people claiming has doubled. So the latest government figures are showing that this figure doubled from 3 million in March 2020 to we've now got 6 million claimants in the 10 months to January 2021. So I'm wondering, with the furlough ending in September, if that figure is going to increase some more. I mean, I'm just mentioning this because the NRLA do quarterly surveys, and at the Q1 survey, it was showing that 46% of landlords haven't currently rented out to tenants claiming benefits in the past 12 months, with 34% saying yes, they had. So that is increasing year on year, and 20% were unsure. But the main concern for landlords is basically with benefit tenants is that they're going to have issues with either rent being paid on time or going into arrears. And I think there's some foundation in that, because out of the 34% who said they were renting out to tenants on benefits, 45% of those were in rent arrears. So, you know, I suppose there is some valid point there, but I would say it is about education. So as this is a growing trend, you know, some more and more landlords are probably going to find themselves with tenants on benefits. So just to mitigate that risk of your tenants going into arrears, it's good for a landlord to understand universal credit, and you know, knowing how to set a tenancy up correctly with that type of tenant, because you can arrange for direct rental payments in advance, and it's also good to pitch the rent. Obviously, I know it might seem a bit obvious, but pitching the rent at an affordable rate, because a tenant on benefits, you know, may struggle with a large top-up fee. But yeah, I recommend some more learning on that for people, because this is a growing trend. And the NRLA do a universal credit course, and that starts from £86. We've also, talking about courses, we have got a basics course, you know, it's called like a fundamentals courses, which basically the basics for landlords, agents, or people running houses in multiple occupation. So they start at £64. So I would recommend anybody starting out on any of those areas that, you know, those are good places to start for, you know, getting the basics on that. We also do bundles, but we call them programs. So we've got a posher term for a bundle. But you can, for example, do like a landlord basics course, which will cover fundamentals, GDPR, rent arrears, and property standards. And that will come in from £98. So absolute bargain for some education there. And talking about bargains and things, you can get a discount on the NRLA membership using my code there, R123. And my final point is just to give you an update on some webinars that are coming up. We've got an introduction to zero deposits, which is kind of an alternative concept to taking a cash deposit. I've used it myself. It's a really good offer to give to tenants. So if you want to learn more about that, that's on the 9th of June. And we have got a webinar about property management after the pandemic on the 23rd of June. So yeah, go along to those if you're interested. And that is my update. Thank you.
Perfect. In that case, we'll go jumping straight back to Wayne. Wayne, are you there?
I am this time. Thanks for that. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so in this quick update, I just thought we'd talk a little bit about the way house prices have been moving over the last few months and the last year. These stats are taken directly off Rightmove, and essentially you can see it's all positive, it's all been positive, and hopefully it will remain positive. Some explanations why the house prices are moving so well. I think there's a few reasons why. One, obviously, people are escaping from the cities still, and as they can work from home, they can commute into town for instance, London, Manchester, the bigger cities, and therefore places that were previously less desirable, such as Wales, as an example, are starting to rocket. People are looking at Wales now, and I'm hearing house prices in Wales are going through the roof, and these stats do show that, as we can see. So that's one reason people are trying to get away from the cities. There's also a lot of clients I see and a lot of vendors I see on survey are telling me that it's because they're upsizing. So they're working from home, need an extra room. So rather than go downwards, they're going upwards now, and borrowing more on the basis that you've got the stamp duty saving as well. So that's another reason. I'm hoping we're seeing a new normal. I think to a degree we could be. Obviously, we never know the future, but we could be seeing a new normal. And what I mean by that is, I think it's fair to say workplace patterns and behaviour have changed, as has technology, as I know at this end, but as has technology. So people can work from anywhere now. I think people have worked out in Africa whilst being chased by lions on this panel. So we can work anywhere. So hopefully we're seeing a new normal, and that should keep house prices up as long as there's no correction coming along down the line. Whether there will be or not, it's difficult to say. I think we're going to be okay for a short while. I think Barclays recently said they've got 200 billion in savings accounts that are waiting to be released. So when that kind of money starts coming out, hopefully after June, when we get released completely, then hopefully we'll see a little bit of a boom for a while. So yeah, that's my quick update anyway.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much, Wayne. Let's move over to, now who do we have here? This is a new announcement. So Simon, please introduce yourself under funded. But you're a moot, by the way, you're a moot.
Yeah, for those keen-eyed out there, you'll see that there's a different logo. At the end of my slides, I will have some new contact information. Yes, funded.co.uk. Please do come and see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a particular lender and then a particular deal I've done and how that ties into the panel members and what this lender's done. I can't mention the lender's name because we're going out live. Whilst they will continue to do this type of deal, they don't particularly like to advertise it, and you'll understand why when I get into the complexities of it. It's a really sweet deal that I've been working on for a number of months. Okay, right. So basically, they do bridging. They're a challenger bank, so they're not your vanilla buy-to-let lender. They will do things that those types of buy-to-let lenders won't do. And in this particular instance, they will consider a PLO, which is a purchase lease option. Now, if you need more information about what a purchase lease option is, there is someone very good on the panel tonight that can give you. In fact, they use them as part of their investment strategy. That's Bronwen. And I do recommend as we go through this that you perhaps consider getting how you present a purchase lease option is really key, and the negotiation of it is not as simple as you might first think if you flick around the internet. So please do reach out to someone like Bronwen to kind of really understand. So this is an agreement made over 24 months. It was a purchase price set at 290,000, which is set at FMV. That's fair market value. Okay. The old landlord was struggling to manage the property to keep it full. The local agents were really not doing a great job either. It had never even reached 50% occupancy. So the buyers knew the market well and could see the demand was high for high quality rooms. Brilliant, thank you. Right, and this is the kind of interior that they created. It's something that we see as a bit of a feature these days, where you're creating a living environment for your tenants, not just doing grey carpets and beige walls, because that just doesn't cut it anymore, especially in this area of, it's a tightly thought area for clients and what have you. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Simon. Okay, so these are the numbers. There's a setup cost here of £30,000. As an investor loan, it was borrowed from from an unconnected party's SAS pension as a loan into this particular purchase arrangement. Okay, and that's another thing that you could potentially reach out to Bronwen. She's done lots of these. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I should go back to the purchase lease option part. It's very, very key. Sorry, very, very key that you do not get a template off the internet and just use it. You need to reach out to someone like Tim and his team and get it individually worded. It costs more money, okay? However, you need that agreement to be absolutely watertight in order to work correctly. Thanks, Simon. If I could go back a couple. Okay, so these are the costs. Purchase prices say £290. The buying costs are solicitors, valuation, and stamp duty. So actually £18,750. And that was also from another investor, funnily enough. So at the moment, this client's put no money in the deal. We can move on again. Okay. If you were to speak to someone like Wayne, who's on the panel, okay, I've got relationships with a number of valuers. This particular property, I'd already spoken to the valuer that I knew was on panel for this particular lender. I'd already run it past them and checked that it was going to value, where it was going to value. We knew it was going to value at 500,000, okay? What isn't exactly obvious in these slides, okay, is that the purchase price is £290,000. The client is getting a new mortgage to buy the property for £375,000. That's more than the purchase price, okay? So if you take off those costs that we showed on the other page, yeah, the client is actually left with £36,250 that they have profited whilst buying this property. So they bought it using none of their own money, using investor money. They reconfigured it and brought it up to spec internally. They used asset finance to buy some of the white goods and also some of the kitchen goods and the boiler, which I also helped them to do. Okay, so again, none of their own money in it. They then used the profits as it went along to pay off those debts. Yeah, at the point of completion, a new loan from another lender to help them buy it. And then they've walked away having paid back all of the investors. They've got £36,000 in their pocket, ready to go, and a property that generates them £29,000 profit per annum net. Yes, yeah. With all of that going on, you need you need quite an insightful property tax lawyer. I can't think of who to recommend you at all to, but we can possibly put you out to someone. Oh yeah, if you've got a tax question, I've got just the man for you tonight. Absolutely. So yeah, that's me. That's you know, the kind of thing that we can do as a group, and that's where all these pieces of information tie in. I also I forgot last time we did this, I didn't put my contact information. So this is my new contact information here. Phone number, the mobile number hasn't changed, but the email address and the landline number. And these are the things that I can help with. So it's buy-to-lets, bridging, refurbishment lending, development loans, semi-commercial, commercial, limited company, service accommodation. That's it. Thank you very much. Sorry, guys, I've talked for too long. I'm renowned for it.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Simon, and great to have you on board now as funded. Let's continue then with the slides. Bronwen, over to you, good self.
Wow, well, it's good to follow Simon Hodgson on that, because, you know, for those of you joining who are perhaps new to property and are maybe just starting out, then, you know, a lot of what Simon was talking about might be a bit of sort of double Dutch, and you might be feeling a little bit anxious at the moment. Well, a purchase lease option is a very advanced strategy. It's something that you might consider once you've got your first few properties under your belt. But the most important thing about property investing is getting that basic knowledge, that basic education around what are the risks, what do I need to do, how do I need to start? And I've got that on an online program, very, very easy to watch. Now, online modules, which are videos, great to watch, but also a little bit of coaching too. And I think that's really important. Now, I've talked a lot about people teaching other people, and we had a great question last month on this subject. I do have a 30-day money-back guarantee, which I would say was an absolute minimum for any course that you might be considering. So if you want to talk to me about other courses around, I learnt with Simon Zucci, more than happy to share my knowledge. And it's also in my book, Building Your Dream Life, which is there on the right. Now, today, I was going to announce this at the end, but I'll announce it very quickly now. For those people who are joining and watching this, there's a £200 discount. So that's the next slide, £200 off. And I think if we can end with this slide at the end of the session, Simon, that would be useful, because then people can make a note of, what code to use. So it's there at the bottom, the link and the code. So maybe we can take those and put those into the chat, into the YouTube session. I can send those to you in the chat, Simon, now if you want, so that you've got that available. But yeah, I love helping people learn, and all that for £495 is amazing. And I don't make this offer very often. So make the most of it while you can. You get my book, you get supporting details, and of course, all my experts here of why I've been successful. Big part of my success. So thanks, everybody. Let's move on to some questions now, I think. Is that right?
Indeed. I'm just going to make sure there's no other slides. No, there isn't, so I can come off of that for now. So thank you ever so much.
If you remember, I am the slideless one.
Yes. Slideless one. Would you like to? Now he's going to give you lots of sympathy. Okay, point, because he should be in Rome. He's missed his flight. His wife has run off with a garden gnome. Nothing we can do about that, Tim. But why don't you just carry on giving us your sympathy stuff, please? Go ahead.
I'll try to be very brave. On the basis of sometimes it's useful to share experiences. Just a bit of an update for us. I'm quite excited because in addition to the property stuff we're doing, my eldest has in the last week got his first job. He's just doing his real estate masters, and he's got a job as a graduate quantity surveyor. My younger one is in his first year. He's finished his first year course as a finance and accountant degree. So I really should have had a third child. A builder would have been useful, but I think I've missed the boat on that one a little bit now, sadly. But anyway, yeah. So building up the empire slowly. In terms of more personal stuff, I thought, again, I've got a couple of projects and it might be useful just to share very small details of those as we go on. One of them actually is a home extension. Now, to be honest, I've been sitting on this for a long time, but I'm finally getting my act together. And I will report in due course. But it does show what I believe is a classic problem for many developers, people who are looking to do something more than just a straightforward buy-to-let, and that's planners. For those of you who ever come across planners, you'll probably be rolling your eyes at this stage. I'm not sure I've come across anybody who's going through planning who hasn't had problems. But just to give you a classic example of the issue we've got, and this is not untypical, and I'll tell you how we get on. We put in what's called a pre-application. That's basically getting the view of a planner before you put the proper planning application to put our roof extension on. And in there, I wanted to put a Juliet balcony, which for those of you who may know is basically if you have got a French windows and you can have a small half balcony. It's quite small. It doesn't stick out. They came back and said, as we were about 100 yards away from the conservation area, they didn't think a Juliet balcony was appropriate, even though no one can see our back garden. What they hadn't pointed out was that in the conservation area, and if I look out the window and crane my neck, and I actually counted them, that there is a development that was made in 2008, and I went round, there are 26 Juliet balconies on this in the conservation zone, and yet for some reason they're objecting to mine. But just to warn you, therefore, that if you have to go up against planners, do prepare for the worst, because simply they are very unreliable. Anyway, I'll let you know how that goes. Secondly, on the SAS, again, for those of you who don't know, I know Bronwen's a big fan of SASs, and I'm sure it's something we'll mention tonight and in future. And I'll share, as someone who's literally coming to them brand new, my experiences. But I'm basically buying a property. I'm buying for $215,000 to put in my SAS. Now, the beauty of this is I'll probably only have to put in, at my estimation, about 110K's worth of cash. I can then claim the tax back I've paid on that. and I'll take a mortgage of about 60,000. So of the £110,000 that gets left in there currently, although we're looking to change in the long term, we're looking at a rent of about 18. So probably after the mortgage is paid, probably about 14 or so. So 14,000 on 110,000 for a very simple deal is pretty good in terms of return on capital. Plus the fact it is tax exempt, so there's no tax on that. So it's just something worth considering, and I'm sure there will be questions. I'm sure Simon Misiewicz in particular can help you with all the tax in it, and Bronwen has huge experience. I think it's exciting for those people like me who don't have a pension. So just thought I'd mention that, and I'll explain how we go on my experience. So far, it's been pretty straightforward, but I'll let you know if there are any issues as we go on month by month. So on to my update as such, and it's going to be fairly short, which is why I've started with some personal stuff. Basically, I was going to tell you what was in the Queen's speech about leasehold reform. So forgive me, but it's one of our specialties, leasehold reform. That's lease extension, enfranchisement, and right to manage. Well, unfortunately, not very much, which is why I haven't prepared slides. I'll give you an example. Back in 2018, the government announces, I quote, a crackdown on unfair leasehold practices. So big announcement, and they're going to get rid of ground rents on new long leases at zero, but new ground rents at zero. And they're going to make the process of purchasing a freehold, I quote, much easier, faster and cheaper. January this year, we had another press release, big announcement. And I quote, millions of leaseholders will be given a new right to extend their lease by 990 years. And another quote, changes could save households from thousands to tens of thousands of pounds. So finally, the Queen's speech announced. And what is it? I'm afraid to say it's virtually nothing. All they've done basically is said that for any new informal lease extensions, and that's extensions that don't go through a formal statutory application, simply the length of the lease at the moment, it won't affect the ground rent, but at the end of the lease, it'll be zero. So in other words, if you've got an 80-year lease, you go for a lease extension, you've got to carry on paying ground rent for 80 years. After 80 years, it'll be zero. So that's it. Even that, they reckon probably won't come in before May 23, 24. They talk about common hold and enfranchisement. I won't bore you with that, but there's no mention whatsoever. They talked about a clever online lease calculator, no mention of that. So those of you who are waiting to hear lots of exciting things about saving money on flats, well, actually, you may have to wait a lot longer. There'll be an advantage here for people with very, 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 very low leases. If you've got a 5-year lease, that might make a difference. But if you've got 80 years left, frankly, waiting for an advantage for another 80 years until your existing term goes, it's not terribly exciting. So there you go. After all the fuss, there may be more coming, but not much so far. Hence, no slide. Tim, the slideless, back to Simon.
Tim, the slide list. Thank you ever so much for that. To say there's no slides, great content as always, especially when you're flying from 30,000 feet in the air, being a pilot that you are. Bronwen, why don't we come on to you? Because there are questions. As soon as Tim was on, started talking about SaaS, inevitably there's people saying, what does SaaS stand for? That was from Linda. Linda, great question. What does SaaS for? Tony Omo 80 came straight thundering in. SaaS stands for Small Self-Administered Scheme. Tony, thank you ever so much for being a panel member. You've been a great guest so far. But why don't you talk in general what a SaaS pension and how you have used it and what the tax breaks are from your perspective?
Yes, well, I mean, we could talk for a long time. I do have a module on this as part of my program. So if anyone wants that, message me and I'll send you a link. That's an hours long webinar with an expert. So I think the other thing we need to say as a group is that none of us are pensions experts, so we can't give advice. But Small Self-Administered Scheme has enabled me to take my defined benefit pension that was with my previous employer, and for some people that could be several employers, and transfer that money at its transfer rate, which sort of is quite a lot of money for some people if they've been like me in a job for 20 years. You can take that money and put it into a separate pension fund called a SaaS that you have the right to invest yourself. Now, you can't invest it in anything. There's lots of rules and regulations. And in order to get that money transferred, you have to be approved as well by HMRC. So, long story short, I'd be very happy to help somebody get the right advice, as I did, 5 years ago now. And I think the big thing for me was being able to invest my pension in something that I had control over. Not only have I got that money to invest in things that I know a lot about, including property, but I can also lend that to other people. I can lend it to myself, not all of it, up to 50% I can lend to my limited company, and I can use that money to invest in other things. So there's an awful lot of real benefits of taking control over something that usually is a little bit of paper that you get once a year that gets filed, because there's nothing you can do about your pension generally. That's what people think. But if you're entrepreneurs like we are, if you have a limited company and you want to take some control and have a legacy indeed for your family, that's another big one for me. With the 2 children I have, you know, my pension would not have gone to them. It would have, half of it would have gone to my husband, and then the rest disappears when he dies. So now I've got full control of that, and my children can inherit that as well. So many benefits. But as I said, happy to send you a summary video with an expert. And indeed, if you want to learn more, book a chat with me. I've got a half-hour consultation in my diary system. So again, I'll put that in the chat box. Simon, if you could put that into the YouTube, that'd be great.
Yes, please do. Yeah, put that in the chat box. I'm certainly happy to. If you've got a link as well, I'm happy to put that link in straight away as well.
Can I just add one thing on that, Simon? Just one thing on that. Everything Bronwen said, I agree 100%. I think it's very exciting. But also worth pointing out, I think sometimes people think, oh, I didn't get a pension started when I was young. It's now far too late. I have a total of £2,000 currently in my pension, and I'm now 59. But I'm going to be able to do this much more quickly. I won't go into the details, but you can put certain quite large sums in there and actually build up quite a sizable capital sum. So although I've left it to 59, it's not going to be a problem. So those of you who aren't perhaps in the first flush of youth and think, oh, I've missed a boat, I need a pension, it's very possible. So another thing worth looking at if you're perhaps on the wrong side of 25, which I am.
Thank you ever so much for that. So always make sure that you get a special advice, educate yourself, especially when it comes to pensions. Many people have lost money in pensions. Many people have gone through things and not understood what they are. Make sure you get educated. Make sure you get a good professional advisor to support you throughout that. We're going to start with the questions. So as we said all the way through this session, if you do have questions, type them in. I can see questions coming in, and I can pretty much happy to say we'll get through these questions. I'm going to start on the WhatsApp. So people that have registered in advance will upload their questions. So going forward, I will send you a link of how to register for the next event. But Ogie has asked a question. Please, how do I help a vendor who's worried about capital gains tax, and will PLO be an option? I think that before we go into any solutions in regards to tax, I would certainly never give advice to someone else. We're not in the world of people suing other people just yet. But I rather suspect if you are saying to someone, well, this is the advice I've been given to give on to you, and that turns out to be incorrect, well, you are the person that gave that advice. So, okay, and anyone listening out to this, please do not give legal advice, tax advice, or mortgage advice to anyone that you know. The best advice that you can give to them is say, speak to your specialist, just like you would do. People that invest in themselves will get a good return on that money. People that try and do things on the cheap will get exactly that. You pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And unless you're in a zoo, you do not want monkeys. So that's my view on that paying monkeys rates. Now, a question over to Simon from Funded. I'll do that all night until we're kind of bored of it. But some from Funded, I want to ask you a question. It's from Helen, actually, not from me. But Helen said, how is the best and cheapest way to fund my next purchase of a holiday let? What's your thoughts on this? And she mentioned about rates in terms of holiday rates, and be good for you to kind of give out some general advice about buy-to-lets versus holiday rates. But also, if she wants to switch between holiday more kind of holiday mortgage products versus a standard buy-to-let, and are they interchangeable?
Okay, right, yeah. So, yeah, just to point out, yeah, this is not individual advice. This is generalised summary of the market. Do we know, Simon, whether she's buying in a limited company or in her own name, or not sure as yet?
It doesn't say, but why don't we assume that, well, let's go with both options.
Okay, all right. So in terms of, okay, for both options, it is possible to pick lenders out there that will allow you to do both. So effectively what they'll do is they will assess the property as if you let it out on a normal tenancy agreement. They will lend against the rental stress test as if it were a normal buy-to-let, but they will then give you permission to run it as a serviced accommodation stroke holiday let. Holiday let is generally the preferred term. Serviced accommodation is considered to be a mini hotel, and that is a little bit of a different kind of thing. So we might need to do a bit of work on the type of stay and the type of people that you have in the building, etc. And as I say, that holds true for both. In terms of absolute rates, the rates are ever so slightly cheaper if you did it in your own name, not by a huge amount. And there are a few more obscure building societies who will accommodate that. However, they do restrict the loan to values at the moment, typically not going much above 70%. Whereas if you put it into a limited company, there are a few lenders out there currently doing 75%. Rates typically are going to sit in the mid to high threes, with a few lenders in the early fours. But you do get that flexibility. So you can, if you like, try it. And if it doesn't work, then go back to doing it as a single route. And I think if you were to get education, and certainly part of Bronwen's education is that in any strategy, you should have more than one exit plan. So if plan A doesn't work, you've got plan B. And if you can have a plan C as well, even better. So you've got 3 different ways that you can use the property. So therefore your purchase is kind of backed up if demand and local demand changes effectively. There we go, Simon.
That's good. I like that. Thank you ever so much for that. I think it's very, very useful to kind of pick that up. There was a question about surveying, but our surveyor has just dropped offline. So I'm going to move away from that. Here he is now, but I'm going to just give him a second just to rejoin the group, and I'll come back to that question relating to surveying. Glenn has asked, has anyone used an STA pro forma on the NRLA website? Here you go, Teresa, one for you. If so, are there any key differences? I guess I'm not sure what they're comparing here, but are there any key differences in terms of what the normal standard letting agent may supply? What's your thoughts about the use? I personally, by the way, everyone listening in, I use the NRLA for my credit checks, my tenancy checks. I use them for my inventory pro formas and my ASTs. So if anyone's thinking, should I use NRLA? I'm a great advocate for those. They're great, easy to use. That's what I like about them. But from your perspective, Teresa, what's the key difference between what a letting agent might use versus NRLA?
Right, thanks for that sterling testimonial there. So the NRLA have set up standard tenancy agreements, and basically, they are thoroughly vetted by specialists. And we've drawn in the knowledge base from landlords over the years as well. Just to ensure that we get the right clauses in our contracts. So they are comprehensive, and the key word is that they're legal as well. So there's nothing in there, so there are no unfair terms in there. If it was ever to go to court, none of none of the clauses could be, challenged by the judge, because they are all compliant. And our tenancy agreements are also compliant with the latest regulations, so it will be compliant with the general data protection regulation, the tenant fee ban, so things like that. So as far as using a letting agent's contract, I think a lot of questions need to be asked. What type of contract are they using? Is it something that they have designed? Is it something that they've had drawn up by a solicitor? Is it something that they do review regularly? Are the clauses in there, are they all fair? I mean, looking at unfair terms, for example, it's where you know, like there's a clause that would have an imbalance of power, which would like favour the landlord, for example. So one thing could be, you know, restricting your tenant's right to serve notice to quit the tenancy. So that would be an unfair term. Also, something that's got like a very broad phrasing to it. So it sort of involves limiting ordinary activities. So for example, there might be strict prohibition on any tenants bringing in flammable materials, or no pets in the property. So they would be like considered unfair terms, because then you're kind of saying to tenants, they can't even bring a box of matches or a goldfish into the property. So the clauses need to be clear and open. So that's my kind of comparison. So it's just, you've got to be very careful about the contracts that you do use, just making sure, that they are basically legal.
It's good. Thank you ever so much for that, Teresa. I think that's a very good summary. And as Teresa said, there's no pyrotechnics at all allowed in properties. So make sure there's no fireworks in the bedroom. Moving on, the question was around VAT. So if we get to a VAT threshold, now VAT is an interesting subject, because if you have a rental accommodation, residential in particular, then there's no VAT requirement, which means that you do not charge VAT to your tenants, even if your rental income is above £85,000 per year. But it does mean that you cannot claim back VAT either. So you kind of win from one hand, but you have to pay out on another. So VAT, there's no need for you to worry about at all from that perspective. So I did miss that question off. Luke has asked a question. LNPG membership. This is for Mr.
You do pay VAT on service accommodation, though, don't you? So
yeah, that's why I mentioned normal residential properties. So if you holiday, it's for sure, and for commercial properties as well. But for normal residential, there's no need to pay for that. Luke has asked the question. So Paul, with his LNPG membership, if I have a fitting team for kitchens and bathrooms, can they buy them with my LNPG membership? I've had this conversation with Nick many times about making sure that you cannot disclose your price list with your team, because they can get rather upset. But why don't you cover that bit off? You're on mute, by the way, Paul, just so you know.
How unprofessional. Goodness me, I should stop watching you.
Thanks, mate.
Sorry. Yeah, I totally agree, Simon. It's very much we're led by a lot of the time how the manufacturers, the people we're dealing with, want us to act. So as Simon says, if your kitchen fitter who uses uses Magnet, for example, on a regular basis, and he's buying, I don't know, say 50 kitchens a year, he would like to think he's got the best deal. Rest assured, he won't have the best deal, because we're buying hundreds of kitchens a month. So, there's no way that he's going to be able to get a deal as good as that. Therefore, if you let him know exactly how much you're paying for your kitchen, he's going to be very upset and have a moan at his branch, and they're going to get aggravation. So, yeah. The other thing is on a financial aspect, we've had, unfortunately, some members give their LNPG card to their builder, and he's gone away and bought products through the system, and lo and behold, it's in your name, and he's disappeared, and you're there with a bill. So my first question would be, can I have your bank details? I think the answer to that would be no. So why would you give them to your kitchen fitter, even if he's your brother or relation? No, don't do it. Not sensible. The other thing is that it is very much a personal membership. So yes, you can use company purchases. So if you've got a limited company, you can use that for. You can purchase on your properties that you're owned in your limited company, but you certainly, as we said, don't want your tradesmen to understand what sort of level discount, because they will be very upset. As I said earlier, that the average discount is somewhere in the region of 50% of what the tradesman will get either at Howden's or at Magnets. So they will be extremely upset. So if he can get you one for 2,000, you're only paying 1,000, he's going to go, what the heck? And hey, you don't want to upset your tradesman before you even start the project. So yeah, please don't do it. One of the issues that sometimes comes up is good old VAT on HMOs. And, there are some projects that you can either get away with 5% VAT, or on some I think there's even zero VAT on some projects if you're refurbishing. The problem is that the manufacturers, so like Magnet, just don't want the aggravation. So if there's a way of your builder taking your invoices, then fine, but I would strongly recommend not doing that. So short and raw, the long answer was no, please don't do it. You will really upset the tradesman. But rest assured, that's the best way to do it, because you're able to identify how much your kitchen fitter is charging you. You can then monitor him and say, right, you did 3 days work for that £5,000. What the hell have you been doing for that? Whereas if you've hidden, or if he's managed to hide that in the overall cost of a kitchen, you don't know what type of quality kitchen you're going to get because you haven't specified it. You might say I want a blue one, but he could get away with buying a cheap blue one. And B, as I said, you won't know that he's charging £5,000 for fitting it, when really and truly you should be looking for around the £1,000 to £1,500 mark for a standard kitchen. So hope that helps.
That's really good. Thank you ever so much for that. Interesting enough, there's a question. I wouldn't mind just keeping getting your views of this. Ogie's asked another question for the panel. How do you assess the GDV for a new build mixed-use property, especially for the shop bit? Can you convert to a HMO and flats? Sounds like there's a lot going on, Ogie, from this perspective. But any panel members who want to come out and talk about doing huge conversion project? Simon Hodgson to the rescue there. Come on, let's get funding this project through Funded.
Right. Okay, let's take that in two parts, Ogie. Let's deal first of all with the mixed use property. It's a really great question. It's a shame Wayne wasn't here to kind of add his perspective to it. So effectively, there are two different ways that you can, or a few different ways that you can approach this. You could leave the residential part of the building as the freehold, create a new lease for the commercial part of the building, and then get two separate mortgages and value them each differently. So you get a block value for the residential part, and you then get a commercial valuation for the unit at the front. Or you could leave them on the one title and get what's known as like a hybrid type valuation. But commercial property is really based on yield, okay? And there's another thing that comes into yield, which is your strength of covenant. So to give that kind of an answer, if you've got a commercial unit, it's empty, you are buying it, you're refurbishing it, you're tenanting the residential part, but it's still empty in the shop, there's a lot less value in the shop because it's empty. And unlike a buy-to-let, it's not like you've got a queue of tenants that will come along and take up a new position. So you might have a maximum 30-day void in a rental property, but in a commercial property, you can have a void up to 6 or 9 months, which is a massively different perspective. The other thing that comes into what's known as the strength of covenant is if you've got a larger shop, and let's say it was run by a not very successful cafe, but it was in a great position, and let's say Starbucks or Costa come along and take out a 15 or an 18-year lease, suddenly the value of that property is absolutely going to skyrocket. It can as much as increase by 4 times, 400%, just because you've got that strength of covenant. And quite often those types of companies will take a lease that has no break clauses in it because they're so confident of their business model and the demand, which again also increases the value. So long story short, you could value that commercial unit from anything from, depending on where it's in the country, from 5 or 6 times its annual income to some parts of the country as much as 15 plus times income, even as much as 20 times income in some very unique locations in the UK. So, Ogie, we need to know where that is before we can really give you more information. Going on to the HMO to flats, I think doesn't Ogie ask whether he needs planning or permitted development, I believe.
I think it's a complex area. And I think, to be honest, when I was reading it, Ogie, if you're listening into this kind of thing, you do need to think about start with the end in mind, as the late great Stephen Covey once said, and think about what your plan of attack is going to be for your property investment journey, but also think about some of the exit strategies as well. Bronwen, you've got something to add on to that?
Well, it was just her question, I think, about converting to flats. I think you've got to look at its current use class. What's its planning requirements at the moment? If it is truly an HMO, you do need to check that it's got planning as an HMO, because it may not. And once you know what it's got planning for, then you can determine whether you need planning to convert it to flats. I would always talk to a local planning consultant, somebody who knows the local planners and who understands this. Again, it's another expert. I have a few of them, but they need to be local to where you're buying, because they understand things are slightly different in different places. So I think, to answer your question, yes, it depends.
I'm going to stay with you, actually, Bronwen, if that's at all possible, because it is HMO related again. Dinesh has asked, I'm considering buying a 5-bed HMO 100 miles away from my own home for social housing, which is what you talked about. And Teresa, if you can come on board after Bronwen, that'd be fantastic. What risks should I be mindful of as a new investor? And I'm just going to emphasize the word new. When you talk about property, a HMO, that's 500, that is 100 miles away, and social housing.
Yes. So HMO, house of multiple occupation, or house in multiple occupation, it's multi-let. It's not an easy strategy, but it is a great strategy. So again, you've got to have that education, that knowledge to know what you're getting into. Because HMO as a starting strategy isn't particularly easy. However, it's not impossible. A lot of people do it. 100 miles away, well, you've got to understand your local area. So if you're going to be looking at HMO, whether it's an existing one or not, does it have demand? Who are your tenants going to be? Is it near a hospital? Is it going to be students? Is it near the university? You've got to really understand the tenants that you're going to be working with. And if it's on the market, why is it on the market? So there's a lot of rules and regulations with licensing around HMOs. So in the area that it's located, you need to understand the local council requirements. So what are the minimum room size standards, the communal areas? And so it goes on. You've really got to do your due diligence, which is something we talk about a lot in this group. So a lot of education, but a lot of due diligence in the area. And 100 miles away, well, you're not going to be able to manage that yourself very easily. So you do need to find people who are experts really in this type of letting to manage it for you. So there's just a few things. I'm sure Teresa can add some more to that.
Yeah, thanks, Bronwen. Some good points there that I would have said myself. So I would say it's highly risky, but it's not out of the realms of possibility. I would recommend education again. If you're choosing a letting agent, you could go via Orla and make sure that you're choosing a letting agent that is suitably registered. But to understand if they're doing their job properly, then you kind of have to understand as well, what the management requirements are for managing a HMO. So it is possible if you got the education yourself, then you know what the agent's supposed to be doing. So then you can then keep on top of that, making sure that's all in order. I would have thought one of the biggest issues when you're living at a distance is if you get antisocial behaviour issues. If you're living like too far away, if you're managing it yourself, then that can be really difficult to get to the property and sort that out. And if you are managing it yourself, you do need to make regular visits, to keep on top of anything happening in the antisocial behaviour arena. And also like property management as well. If suddenly there's you know, sort of burst pipes or, you know, some flood or something in the property, as Bronwen's saying, you either have to have contacts there, or you have to be able to get to the property quickly, or have a good agent on board.
Thank you ever so much for that, Teresa. I noticed that talk about antisocial behaviour. Simon Hodgson he's got his hand up. I didn't know if you want to add anything there, Simon, or if you just hands up for any reason.
Yay! Did I misunderstand the question? Were we talking about social housing or renting to a housing association / charity?
It says here social housing.
Okay, well, let's assume that is to tenants on benefits, under normal HMO circumstances. If it was to a local housing association or a charity who are social housing, then generally in most circumstances you will need to have a minimum of 12 months HMO, normal HMO lending experience before you can go to a lender that will allow you to do that kind of thing. However, we do need to check your individual circumstances, but under most circumstances, it would be quite hard to do. You possibly would need to buy using a bridge if you don't have the required experience, which adds to the riskiness, especially given the fact it's 100 miles away.
One thing Teresa mentioned at the beginning was the fact that you should take regular breaks. So I know the word breaks in that reminded me that unfortunately, when I started this YouTube session tonight, I was drinking rather lots of this. And now, so if you kind of see me kind of shaking around, it's because I'm trying to hold my bladder together. Talking about leaks, Paul, you mentioned before about not providing details to your tradesperson in regards to your LNPG membership. One thing I want to add on to that was the VAT comment that you made. In relation to can you get someone like Magnet to reduce your VAT from 20% down to 5%? Well, actually, HMRC, it's a requirement for the tradesperson to buy and fit the materials. Now, to get around this, and this is the conversation I had with Nick Watch on, is that you can pretty much say, well, I want the tradesperson to end up with the invoice, but I will pay for the materials. And then that way it circumnavigates the requirement from HMRC, but also make sure that the product prices are kept confidential. So just on that, you had your hand up though, in regards to what was being said from Teresa. So why don't you get in your thoughts on that one?
Yeah. I was just going to say that on the VAT, that's what I did on a recent project where I think I spent something like on LNPG prices. This is £15,000 on the kitchen, so it was not your standard kitchen. But I ended up paying I think 5% VAT on that. But yeah, hey, now supported. Social housing we were discussing, and what I was going to add the input on. Simon Hodgson mentioned housing associations, and what I would say is that there's particularly if, and I'm talking now from a very centric Birmingham position, there are loads and loads and loads and loads and loads, and I think I'm giving you the impression there's loads of accommodation which is designated for supported living, where you do get a far superior rent. But two things on Birmingham at the moment is that they are looking to significantly reduce their housing stock. So they are really pushing pressure onto the housing associations. And B, if you're tempted to, say if you're in London particularly, then obviously you're looking at somewhere in Birmingham. I would just say that, don't be kidded by the returns that you will get, because along with the super rentals that you get, you also get the super damage, because the tenants tend to be very vulnerable, and therefore you tend to find that you are literally in between tenants, you're paying, I know, 2 to 3K per room. It's that much damage because you're having to refurbish everything. You're having to change all the furniture. They usually go away. I've just had a tenant move out, and I don't know why, but the top drawers decided, he didn't like the top drawers, so he smashed that up of a 4-drawer cabinet. So unless you got spare stock, then you got to replace the cabinet. He decided to step on the edge of the wardrobe to reach the top, even though he was a huge bloke. But hey ho. So that's collapsed the wheels, and so this is the sort of types of tenants that you come across in these vulnerable situations. So don't be flattered by the potential returns. Speak to someone who's got experience, and go with it that way. And of course, learn more by educating yourself. So speak to Bronwen.
Thanks for that. Interestingly enough, Bronwen has shared a link for Supported Living Gateway, so I have shared that link on there. Bronwen, I'm going to make it quick. Could you make it quick on your next comment? Because I'm going to move quickly through next questions.
The supported living is the latest buzzword around really over the last 8 months, 9 months. So Supported Living Gateway tells you everything you need to know. So if you wonder what the hell we're talking about, go to that link, Supported Living Gateway, and you can find out about what we're talking about there. Okay, cheers.
Perfect. Thank you, Bronwen. As I mentioned, this is a YouTube live. So what I'm going to do, I've gone purposely onto the WhatsApp channel for questions, which we use internally, but I want to make sure that I answer your questions online as well. And thank you ever so much for that. So the first question I see on the YouTube was Vivian Lee. Vivian, great for you to be joining us on the YouTube channel, because I know that you do help a lot of people from Hong Kong to come over to the UK and invest in property as well. So if any Cantonese people from Hong Kong are listening into this channel right now, then make sure that you see Vivian's Lee's question and then engage with her there. But actually, to answer questions, I'm wondering if it ever makes sense to buy the first, second property in personal name and then set up a company for the third and fourth and other properties. And this relates to tax question. So if it should it be the first or second property? And to be honest, this is the same kind of answer I'm going to give to people when they say, how many properties should I buy to get to 10K per month? Which is another kind of just a throwaway comment. I want to get to 10K per month without realizing how much they need to live off. But that's a different story. So is it 1, 2, or 3 properties, or is it one good property that sends you over the edge from an income tax perspective? So I would always say that it's worth understanding the type of properties you're getting into, because if you buy a 3-bedroom single-let property, that is going to be generating a lot less rental income and profit than a 5, 6-bedroom HMO, as an example. So comparing 1 or 2 properties to say from a tax perspective what makes sense itself is kind of difficult to answer. So you really need to think about your own income levels of income, and then think about the tax consequences of adding properties as you go along. And I often say to people, it's a case-by-case basis. It should never be how many more properties can I put into my own personal name, because it could be just the one that sends you over the edge. And equally, you need to think about what you're going to do in 5 years. Vivian, funny enough, continues the question to say, does this structure impact borrowing and other having to do 2 sets of accounts and extra tax costs? Well, clearly, Vivian, yes, it does. Anyone, and there's plenty of questions that come up on this forum every single time saying, should I use a limited company? At what point do I use a limited company? And those are never easy to answer on this particular session. I could go all night. I don't want to do that. This is a property expert panel, and I want to make sure that we get experts to answer good questions. So my thought process is go away and have a think about what your level of income without property for the next 1, 5, and 10 years. And then think about, well, how much do you need to live off? And then thirdly, how much income are you going to be deriving from your properties? And then that will tell you a little bit more about your perspective and where you might be lending. Income-wise, you need to think, well, do I need the income from the properties, or do I need to invest that into my children and leave it with them as a legacy? There are so many questions that you could go through. And I spent an hour just with one family to talk about should they use a limited company or not. So to answer that question, I'm going to throw it back to you and say you probably need to think about this from a holistic perspective and look at time frames. 1, 5, and 10 years. What income are you going to be generating without property? What property income are you going to be having as a total? And then what do you really need from a lifestyle perspective? And then go away and then speak to an accountant. So I think that kind of covers a lot of people's questions about limited companies, because it's not a straightforward thing at all. End secret, interesting enough. Do tell me if I've got this pronunciation wrong, but end secret is on here. Loveth says, hi Simon, is it possible to use savings and credit cards as a form of deposits? I'm not going to answer that. It's not me. I don't think this is really aimed at. So Simon Hodgson, here's a question from YouTube saying, is it possible to use both savings and credit card as a form of deposit for a buy-to-let? I am not confident to use a bridge loan yet. What's your thoughts about using credit cards as a deposit?
Well, credit cards, typically, I suppose you could have them on 0% interest balance transfer, but let's take them at their nominal value of let's say 18+% in terms of cash. I would say it would be very difficult. Well, it's not a great idea to use that kind of borrowing. It used to be a recommended form of going in property investing 20 years ago. And then once having done that, yes, there will be a number of lenders that you will then completely blow out the water, because they're going to look at your unsecured debt to income levels and kind of go, well, hang on a minute, you're in a position that really isn't sustainable unless your property investing goes well, at which point they're going to kind of jump out. So you might actually back yourself into a point where you need to take a bridging loan out in the second place, because you've taken out the credit card debt. I definitely think that is an individual consultation to work out where they're at, what they're trying to achieve, how to achieve it, which types of lenders can then work with them to do that, and then tailor how they might take on the debt to do what they need to do. There are 250 plus bridging lenders in the marketplace. There's some real cowboys out there, proper cowboys, because it's a completely unregulated market space. And I'd also say that it's really key that you work with a broker who works with certain bridging lenders regularly, so that you have the might of the broker's weight against the lender to make sure that they look after you correctly and don't put you with what pays them the most, puts you with the bridging lender that will look after you the best. Okay, it's really key. A lot of these bridging lenders will derive funding lines from various different means, and if we go into some kind of difficulty in the financial market, etc., those funding lines can be pulled very quickly, and part of the T's and C's of the bridging loan agreement that you will sign will say that you can be asked to repay that loan pretty much immediately. Even
Simon, pop quiz for you, just as before I move on, because we've got a surveying question and we do want to get on there. You mentioned about cowboys. Who said the famous line, "Get off your horse and drink your milk"?
I don't know.
The clues in the question. I'm going to go to Wayne.
My starter for 10.
He doesn't know the answer to the question.
John Wayne. There you go. And talking of Wayne, I'm moving on to Wayne. That's why I did that. See how I connected the dots there. So Charles has asked a question. Wondered if surveyors should be discussing their survey findings with vendors, estate agents, or anyone else other than the client. Wayne, what's your views on confidentiality on surveys?
Hello, I'm back again. Sorry, everybody, technical issues, but we're here now. So, okay, so first of all, confidentiality is paramount for anybody who's dealing with a client. The information is confidential to them, and you shouldn't really be discussing it with anybody else. Now, it's a contentious point between surveyors and between estate agents and anybody else, really, but the rules are clear. I've just written an article for the RICS, which is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors monthly magazine, to try and help surveyors understand, because some of them don't understand this point, that ultimately you shouldn't be discussing what you find on survey with anybody but your client. Now, I will be asked every single time I do a survey, pretty much, have you seen any problems? And I always say, sorry, I can't tell you because I'm not allowed to tell you, first and foremost. But more importantly, I can't tell you because I don't actually know the answer. And the reason I don't know the answer is because I don't know the client, the buyer. One client, I may say there's a crack in a wall and they don't care. I could tell a different client about the same property, about the same crack, and they will pull out of the purchase. So in reality, I honestly don't know the answer to the question. And it's important for a vendor to understand that, and an estate agent, really, because if I was to say to the vendor, yeah, everything's fine, no major problems, they can then go off based on that knowledge and start to spend money, spend time. They may buy a new sofa, they may pay legal fees, they'll start to do things. And all of a sudden, buyer pulls out. Who's to blame but the surveyor? Because they shouldn't have said anything. So it's really simple. You shouldn't be telling anybody. Now, estate agents are the same. Estate agents will ask any problems with the property. And I have various things I say to estate agents when I'm asked that, because they are a little bit more pushy than vendors in this case, and they do really want an answer. I understand why. But again, I have to be very careful what we say as surveyors. And a recent example, I said to a surveyor, to an estate agent, yeah, no problem getting into the property. Everything was fine getting in. All doors are locked when asked the question. So I didn't answer his question. I answered a different question, which is what politicians do all the time. But he went to the vendor and told the vendor that I said it was a fantastic bungalow and there was no problems. Well, I didn't say that. So you do have to be very careful. And it's a fine line for surveyors, in particular, if they work with estate agents and get work from estate agents, because they're trying to manage, one, their source of work, and two, the client requirements. As I keep saying to them, I used to train surveyors, by the way, hence why I say this. It doesn't matter. Your paramount duty is to your client. If you upset anybody else because you don't want to say it, then that's your job. Unfortunately, our job is to upset people if we have to. If they're asking us things that we can't tell them, try and tell them in the nicest way, but we can't tell them, I'm afraid. And that's it in a nutshell.
What I'm going to do, thank you ever so much, Wayne. I am going to do a quick fire Q&A. So panel members, short bursts of answers, nothing else. Otherwise, I will mute you. Okay, so that's the power of Zoom. So here we go. So here's one for you, Tim. Hopefully you're still not moping about buying Rome in Grome. Here's a little bit of a groan of a joke there. But they're saying here, looking to buy holiday let property, but one has found the owner stated that it was the title deeds is 1872, and that the land was not to be used for trade or business. So wasn't sure if it was meant that it could be used for a holiday let or not. I guess, would you have to just quick answer, but would you have to just look at the title deeds a bit more closely?
Probably. I'd run that past one of my team, my conveyancing team, but I know there are sometimes problems with restricted covenants. You can get indemnity insurance against it, but sometimes the issue is actually there's no one left around to enforce it, but there is a risk.
Okay, and I think you've answered the question about the freehold and buying into those. So I'm not going to go into too much, but there is a question from Bradley saying, my conveyancing solicitor has gone out of business. Not sure how that's possible, but they've gone out of business. Can someone pick it up halfway through the process?
Yes, certainly someone can, but frankly, they'll probably have to charge you the full amount, I would imagine, because effectively they're starting from scratch. They have to check all the work that's been done. So yeah, I'm afraid it can be done, but it's going to be effectively start from scratch.
Okay, Simon Hodgson, quick fire. Quick fire. I've been monitoring you. Mike said, "What's the pros and cons of funding a deal through Crown Property versus traditional lending?"
Pros and cons. It really depends on what the deal is, I think, is what we're going to say. If it's a development deal, potentially there's cheaper money than the crowd platforms. The crowd platforms can be slightly more lenient in terms of underwriting the deal and going past wrinkles. Fair
enough. Thank you ever so much for that. I want to stay on with you, Simon. There was a question about, again, switching between a HMO and a holiday let. I'm going to ask you the question, what about mortgages? There isn't, well, okay. In generalized terms, there isn't a mortgage that will allow you go from HMO to SA or flip between the two, or to run an HMO as SA, because effectively that is units within a building. You would need to have dedicated experience of running that type of property before you could get additional borrowing, which is an oxymoron, because how do you get experience if you can't borrow? No, great point. And from a tax perspective, holiday lets have a different tax focus than HMOs and single let properties. So you do need to really be careful with just swapping from one thing and another. And it is back to that whole point of understanding what your strategy really is, because if you fall foul of a holiday let, let's say halfway through the year, and you do not meet the holiday let conditions, then you've got real big problems in regards of Section 24 mortgage interest relief cap. So you are allowed to offset all the mortgage interest costs for holiday lets, but not for HMOs. And if you switch over halfway through, bang goes the allowance for that particular thing. So problems all along. Someone's asked a question regards to holiday lets. I'm not going to go into too much. I think we spoke about, someone explained SAS. We've already talked about that. I'm just going to go back to one of the questions here. There was questions about rent to rent, but I'm going to ignore. Actually, Bronwen, I'm just going to get your views because there's a couple of questions in here. What's your views on rent to rent in this day and age?
Yeah, rent to rent. Well, let's explain what that is. Rent to rent is having an agreement with an existing landlord to rent their property and then to manage that property under your own control. So you don't own it. The landlord still owns it, but you have an arrangement where you're allowed to manage it on their behalf. Now you can then change the use of that to a point as long as it's allowable. So I know that you can, depending on what you negotiate, the price to be on a monthly rent to the owner, if you can then earn more and change the strategy perhaps to serviced accommodation where you can earn quite a lot more per month, then you take the profit from that. Now, I find that's quite risky because it's all about the negotiation. But at the end of the day, you don't have an asset. This is not your asset. It's somebody else's asset. So you can't then leverage that property because it's not yours. So a lot of people say it's a great strategy to begin with because you don't need a huge amount of money, which is true, but you're still not building your own asset. So, I would say, you should learn a lot about it before you go into it. But I would still advocate getting a property that you own and renting it out. You will own that asset going forward and you can manage that and leverage that. But I think other people here perhaps have got more knowledge than I have on rent to rent.
Well, we can cover that off another day. I'm just conscious of getting all the questions in before we finalise in the next couple of minutes. But I think that's a good point where we can leave that. There's a quick question for LNPG. Paul, quick answer, please. LNPG question, please. I'm the owner of a first property investment property, which needs some work. Can I join the LNPG platform before I'm actually a landlord?
Yes, because technically, as soon as you've got your property, which is by exchange, then you can check and utilise the LNPG insurance. So the answer is yes.
Okay, good answer there. Thank you ever so much for that. I'm going to throw the question, actually, this question to Bronwen and yourself, and we'll probably need to cram a couple of comments in from each of you. But if someone's starting with £40,000, how should someone start to invest in property? Just a couple of points from each of you.
Definitely as a deposit on a property, and depending on what the opportunity is to add value to that property, if you can buy it below market value, you're going to have many more choices. So yeah, invest a little bit of that in your education first. Okay, so it can be as little as £500, to start learning. But yeah, definitely start to look at buying assets.
Paul.Hilliard.
Yeah, totally agree with what Bronwen says. The other thing I would suggest is that perhaps look to JV, that's joint venture with somebody, because that will give you better opportunity and you'll be learning at the same time, so gaining the experience so you can go and get a better mortgage product on the second deal or even on the first, because you'll be benefiting from their experience.
Great stuff. Great stuff. One question that came out of, it's a continuous theme, but people talk about incorporation. Again, for this panel, it's really not going to be something that I can answer. When people are talking about incorporating their properties to a limited company, again, it goes back to what I said before. What's your 1, 5, 10-year plan from an income perspective, without property, then with property, and then overall what you actually want. The one thing I would say about the types of taxes you need to think about is not just income tax, but you also need to think about inheritance tax. If you've got investment properties in your own personal name, they will all be subject to inheritance tax. If you use a limited company, there is a way to minimize IHT. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but it is something for you to speak to your tax advisor all about. I'm just aware of time, really, so I'm going to purposely go to one question, and then we're going to probably close out with questions for tonight. Bronwen, over to you about this one. It's regards to, and actually I'm going to go from Bronwen then straight to Tim. It's regards to a commercial property and then converting it into residential flats. What's your experiences? And then straight over to Tim.
Okay, commercial to residential, again, been a big buzzword since the government changed the rules and allowed permitted development. You need to have a lot of knowledge about what you can and can't do. They're definitely around planning. If you think permitted means, oh, it's fine, I'll get planning. Not necessarily. So you've got to understand planning. You've got to, you've got to understand if I'm going to keep this property, am I going to build it out myself? But to get that planning, you've got to have a huge amount of investment of architects and builders and other people, other experts around you that, we don't even have in this little circle here. You're going to be spending a fair amount of money. I've done it a couple of times now. Once I've got the PD, it took 5 months, got the PD and then sold it with planning permission. So that's quite a nice strategy if you again get the knowledge. Tim, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, could probably add a whole load on this. My personal experience, 3 or 4 quick tips. First of all, yeah, planning, you're absolutely right. Although we had offices, the planners told us we had the wrong sort of offices. So we had to go to a planner and prove actually there's case law. But anyway, that was arguing the toss with the council. Problem with planners, going back to my earlier comment, 3 things I'd say. If you're going to use builders and project managers, do your due diligence and really do it in depth. We had problems with both of ours that I learned by my experience. Secondly, keep heavily involved and keep an eye on them. I've shared it probably before on this, but a classic example will be very quick. We're going to have 2 windows replaced, 2 or 3 grand each. I looked at them, went round with the builders, and the project manager said, "Are they the ones you're going to replace?" "Oh yes, absolutely." "But look, the sills have gone. Could you just replace the sills?" "Oh yes, we could." Cost me 200 quid rather than 2 grand. The builder and the project manager, neither had picked up on it. The builder, I think, was dodgy. And lastly, if you are going to have a contract, think about penalty clauses. We used, because it's a bigger contract, we had what's called a JCT contract, and we included a penalty clause, and the penalty clause was stiff, £1,500 a week, and it really saved our bacon. So don't go into this lightly. They can be profitable to be made, but it is complex, and they're my 3 tips of what not to do, the mistakes to avoid.
Okay, Bronwen, do you want to wrap up? I've got one final thing to say, actually, and then I'll let you wrap up, actually. Everyone listening in from the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're listening in tonight, make sure that you like this video wherever you're watching, so it shows other people that it's been useful. So please do press that like button, smash it, press it, click it, do whatever you want to do, but make sure you hit it. Also, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because we will be releasing videos, and this video will be on tomorrow morning, so you can re-watch it. Bronwen, why don't you go through this final slide, and then I'll talk about the next event.
Brilliant, wonderful. Well, thanks, Simon, for your hosting of this. It's amazing how much we've covered in such a short period of time. And you can see how many experts we've got, and the fact that we're also investors ourselves. So we've got a huge amount of experience, but you've got to start somewhere. So those of you listening today who haven't got that basic education yet and want to sort of get into it fairly quickly, nothing better than doing something online where you can watch online videos that I've created using my own examples and a huge amount of information. So 22 modules now, including a lot of experts from this panel helping me and helping you understand. So 22 modules plus my book, plus an hour of coaching, and then supporting documents. You can't beat this price, which is for our expert panel people who are watching this now, £200 off. And it's never been this cheap, so go for it. No time like the present, do it now, and I look forward to helping you on your journey. So back to you, Simon, just to quickly talk about the next event.
Yes, thank you ever so much, Bronwen, and to all the other panel members, which this show could never be possible without everyone bringing their expertise into this session. The next session we do have is the 5th, Monday, the 5th of July at 7 p.m. So that date again is Monday, the 5th of July at 7 p.m. So make sure that you join us. Panel members, if I can ask you to stay behind again, Tim, I hope I didn't sound like a teacher too much then. But for the rest of you, thank you ever so much for joining us. And I very much look forward to seeing you all again soon. And that brings me to a close for tonight. So good night from everyone here today.
Yes, bye.